All right. Hey, Adam. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks, everybody, for joining. I'm just going to do a quick intro here and we'll dive right in. This is the second of a few conversations we're going to be hosting over the next few weeks about COVID-19 and the impact on cities, districts, and neighborhoods, particularly focused on people on the ground working to solve problems during this crisis and thinking how they're thinking about the recovery. Last week, we spoke with Bobby Boone out of DC, a friend of ours who works in retail. His company, And Access, is doing some really interesting work. That conversation was a ton of fun, and you can see on our website or on our YouTube page the full video of that conversation if you missed last week. We're continuing to do at Yard & Company, a lot of design work and engagement work for our partners and clients during COVID-19, and we're trying to share most of that online as well and open source that. So keep an eye on our website for any ideas or interventions that you want to kind of take a look at and dive into. And you can always reach out to us and talk to us about those if you feel the need. But even though we're doing a lot of the work in different places, we're still very curious how people in different roles are shaping the recovery efforts around this crisis. So today we invited Adam Gelter in. I've known Adam for a really long time. We both went to DAP at UC, and we've both been working in the nonprofit community / real estate development world in Cincinnati for quite a while. He's the executive vice president of development at 3CDC. 3CDC is a nonprofit development corporation working in downtown and in the adjacent neighborhood of Over-the-Rhine. They pretty much do it all for those two places. They manage civic spaces, they develop mixed-use projects, they do streetscape improvements and designs, they own and manage retail. So there's a lot of different ways this conversation could go. Their work has led to over $1 billion in reinvestment in the central business district and in Over-the-Rhine. So with that, let's dive in. Adam, I asked Bobby last week, when we were talking to him, the first question was, where are you in your house? Have you found a place that is like a safe zone to focus and get work done, or do you bounce around?
I stay in one spot. I got a desk, but it's unfortunately in a big, nice room, but also serves as the door in and outside to the backyard that we usually go out. So most of the time it's in great shape. I'm quiet. I have a door I can close, and my young son doesn't disrupt me. But they may come back in from their walk here shortly, and you'll hear them trample through behind me. So
I was gonna say you just jinxed it.
But that actually, people usually like it because he walks through just for 2 seconds and says something funny, and then he's gone.
Okay, now you've really hyped it up.
Yeah, we'll see.
So why don't you just, for those maybe that are watching or listening that don't know 3CDC well, that aren't of Cincinnati, I know people in Cincinnati are pretty familiar, but walk us through 3CDC's real briefly, their formation story and how you guys are structured.
Yeah, and I often find that even people in Cincinnati don't think they know what we do, but not exactly how we do it or how we're structured. So we're a private, nonprofit, full-service real estate development company. We were formed after some civil unrest in Cincinnati in 2001, based on a recommendation of a task force that the city and corporate community put together to sort of see how they could move forward from that civic unrest. And essentially, the recommendation was for a private company to take responsibility for redevelopment of the center city. And as you mentioned before, it's the neighborhood of Over-the-Rhine and the central business district. And so that was led by Procter & Gamble, and the then CEO, A.G. Lafley, was the chair of the board, and really was a startup company with all the major corporate players in Cincinnati. So P&G, Kroger, Macy's, along with the bank folks, Fifth Third, PNC, US Bank, and they still are the people who sort of are the driving force of the organization. And we're probably unique in a few ways. One is really probably three things. One is geographically, we're very tightly concentrated. We only work in those neighborhoods. So usually an organization our size would be maybe almost citywide or certainly in multiple neighborhoods. We only work in a about a 2 square mile area of the center city. And that's partly a testament to our board members who, could have a long time ago said, oh, this was good, let's go do it somewhere else or whatever. They stay committed to what we're doing. Probably one of the biggest things that differentiates us is that those corporations then put their money where their mouth is, and we have about $150 million of private loan funds from those corporations that we can use like a normal developer would use equity, but we do it as loans that are subordinated that allow us to do a lot of the real estate development projects that we do. And the third thing is that we are truly full service. So not only do we do all the actual real estate development and everything that goes into that ourselves, we also manage the property, we merge with special improvement districts, so we do all the safe and clean stuff, and we have a separate arm that does events within civic spaces that we've renovated in partnership with the city. So we also have a whole team that does operation events throughout the year to sort of activate the civic spaces that we work in.
Great. So let's start with the brick and mortar, kind of the capital stack aspect of what you guys do, because you work with tax increment financing, you have the equity fund you mentioned, you guys have utilized historic tax credits, new market tax credits, in some cases low income housing tax credits. What is with the current recession that's being caused by what's happening, and based on previous recessions, whether it be the valuation of tax credits or city bond ratings, what is keeping you up at night right now related to that aspect of your work?
I think probably the biggest challenge is going to be the city and state's finances. Huge partners of ours, both the city and state. We are one of the biggest users of the state's historic tax credit program. We are there's an infrastructure loan program, a 166 loan program the state has that we use to fund a bunch of our projects, basically loans that have no interest or principal for some period of time at the beginning to let you ramp up projects that we've used a ton. And then the city's been a huge supporter on many different ways. And, they have what they're facing is daunting, and their ability to continue to be that partner, and it's not their fault, is going to be limited. So I think that's our biggest concern overall, or thing we sort of adjust. But that's been the case over time. I mean, the city was hugely supportive at the foundation of 3CDC and always has been, but we've been trying to limit the city's participation everywhere possible for years. So we're just going to have to continue that trend, but probably accelerate it. I mean, the tax credit pricing stuff, it fluctuates all the time. This certainly isn't going to help, but I think more of an incremental impact than a sort of something that's keeping me up at night.
Do you, Adam, see any of the unique attributes that go into your structure as being particularly useful in responding to an event like this, in terms of your ability to quickly shift gears, to be nimble, to be focused in the areas that you're focused rather than, taking on the entire city? I mean, are there certain aspects to the partnership that give you particular strength today?
Sure. I mean, I think there's probably several things. I mean, you mentioned the geographic, because we work in such a small area, and even though we have over 100 tenants, I know basically every one of them, you know what I mean? And we can easily get to them and see them. Obviously not right now, but we're calling them on the phone. We know everybody, and we're very engaged, hands-on with folks. So that makes it easier to communicate with folks. And the size of what we're dealing with monetarily puts us in with like larger developers, but they're often spread all over and don't have the same kind of relationship we have with our tenants. And then the mission driven nature of what we're doing helps as well, because we're not interested in, we obviously need to pay back the money that we borrowed to do these projects, but we're not trying to make money. So we can we were pretty prudent always of like being pretty cautious about how we approach things. And that's served us well now because we've been able to offer a lot of rent relief to our tenants and do different things like that um, maybe aren't afforded to other folks, partly because the folks who are taking most of the risk are the corporate folks who've put their loan funds in at subordinated positions, and they're the sort of first hit, and they've been willing to take that risk and are continuing to do that, and they've delayed their repayment and those sort of things in order to make things more palatable for the tenants.
Well, you've had a focus really since the beginning on mostly local restaurants, bars, retailers. Has that helped you during this process? I mean, if you had a bunch of national chains in these storefronts, which you easily could have, it's a little more difficult to communicate with them, I would assume.
Yes, and we have 3 national tenants, and out of our just over 100, and they've actually been fine. And we specifically picked those tenants because we thought they were a fit for what we're trying to do. But yes, they're like trying to work out 100 or 500 deals. You know what I mean? So our ability to like just pick up the phone and call them and have a conversation, although we've been able to do that eventually, is more challenging. So it definitely helps that we have that local focus on what we're doing.
And so a couple of interventions that I've seen from the outside, maybe there's been more that you do want to share or just talk through these, but you mentioned rent abatement, I believe was one. And then talk briefly too, if you can, about the gift card match program that you guys did, which seemed to be a big hit.
Yeah, so we were trying to think of different ways, and in talking to our tenants, one of the biggest challenges is literally just free cash flow. Like they're living more or less hand to mouth, and although we can take our expenses away, they have other expenses that just aren't going away. Even if they lay off their staff or furlough for people or whatever they've done, there's just a real cash crunch, and that's only going to be exacerbated when and if they're able to reopen, needing cash to hire those people back and buy food or buy if a retail store to buy new stuff to sell. And so we said, oh, let's raise some money. And we put some money that we had set aside and we raised $37,000 to essentially do a gift card match. If people buy a gift card to a business downtown, we said we'd buy, or Over-the-Rhine, we'd buy a matching amount to a business, another business downtown Over-the-Rhine. And in about 24 hours, we had submitted about $122,000 worth of gift cards. So we had to quickly go and raise the rest of that money so we could try to honor everybody's. I guess we didn't have to, but we felt we should, and we were lucky enough to do that. And we learned some things along the way. We stupidly had people just email us the receipt, and so there was 1,500 emails we had to like go through and hand type into an Excel sheet. So that took a few days, honestly, before we even knew how much money we were, how bad we were in the hole. But people really did think it was a good thing. And we had a lot of demand, not only to buy and get the matching gift cards, but from other people coming to us saying, hey, we want to participate and provide funds for the match. And so we raised an additional $205,000 for second round, got smarter, had a form with a Google Doc that populated itself from people submitted. And we did that second round of match. All the matching cards were to minority and women-owned businesses. That's still open now. It's the Cincinnati card connection. If you want to go and buy a gift card, there's still a little bit of money left to be matched on that program. And then we'll probably have a third round. We got another, looks like about $75,000. We'll probably put another twist on what that is. So I think all in all, we're going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $700,000 to $800,000 of cash infusion of these businesses. And again, that's cash now when they sort of desperately need it. And that's not just our tenants, that's any business in downtown or Over-the-Rhine.
Right. Yeah, and I loved seeing that adjustment in the second wave. It was pretty smart to ensure support to minority and women-owned businesses. I thought that was great.
And then the other thing we did was, which this worked as well, is the first round, 90% of the cards are bought to bars and restaurants. And so we said in the second round, we'll match half of your gift card to a bar and restaurant and 100% to retail or service businesses. You know, we have a lot of salons and things like that. And so that worked as well. So in the second round, we're about 75% retail service and about 25% food and beverage. And so we're trying to use the data and see what we can do to get evenly distribute the money as best we can.
Right.
In terms of today, Adam, how many, just off the top of your head, unless you have the exact number, how many of the total businesses that you guys look over are open in some capacity or another?
As of last week, it's roughly a little less than half, and that's growing. I mean, slowly people are opening up as the state here in Ohio opens up slowly, and as the PPP loan program doesn't work very well for most of our tenants, and there's a lot of issues with it that we could get into if you're interested. But even with that, people are still using it. It's better than nothing, I think, kind of thing. And so they are, as they get that, it's sort of built-in incentive for them to reopen in some capacity. And so we're seeing more folks as they get their loans actually come through, move to reopen in some capacity, particularly the bars and restaurants.
And you mentioned, the couple programs to keep, driving dollars into these businesses, even if it's just a carry-out type business. I would wonder, with the conversations you're having around your tables, around your virtual tables, around evolving or shifting priorities or mandates from your partners. You guys have built a long track record of trust, and I know they give you a fair amount of autonomy in acting smartly in the district. But I'm curious to know, is it too early to tell if the mandate is going to shift in terms of how you're spending your resources and your time in helping these retailers reposition themselves for a COVID era operation as it starts to open back up more robustly and people start using the spaces a lot more?
I don't think there's going to be I don't envision a dramatic shift. It's sort of like maybe a little bit of a return to the basics or principles that we've always done, but we've never really gotten that far out of what we always do. Mm-hmm. And there are interesting things that are right up your guys' alley that we're pursuing that, like many other cities, like read the writing on the wall that the restaurants aren't going to be able to open up immediately at full capacity. And so how can we do creative outdoor dining, get the city to relax some rules to allow us to take up the parking lane in front of a bunch of businesses and use it for outdoor dining? And how do we get the state? Ohio has a particularly sort of draconian liquor license rules that we need to work through at the state level along with the city, and how do we get them comfortable with things that they haven't been comfortable in the past.
Right.
And I'm hopeful that we can use this, and the city seems eager and the state seems eager to try to help. And then we can use this to show that it works, which again, this is right up your guys' alley, right? Of taking these little things and trying to get them done. And then, using that to say, hey, we could do this more often or keep some of these as permanent. And so we're trying to work on, there's even some places where we want to just shut down the whole street, right, to let there's enough businesses and enough not need for that street to be through traffic to say there's streets that we've been trying to close for years that I think we'll maybe be able to do for some amount of time and see how it works.
Yeah. Don't let a crisis go to waste, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The silver lining here is that this makes us all realize that there are a lot of dumb rules in place.
Yeah.
And that can either be temporarily lifted or maybe permanently lifted. And most of those we're seeing are around how we use our public space. It's amazingly over-regulated. So it'll be interesting to see how you guys deal with that.
So we have a proposal into the city, and we'll see how they react.
Yeah, that's great. And you see that as as both a long term and a medium term. So you see that as a post-COVID permanent intervention, but also something in the next for this summer.
Yeah, so the goal would be is when these businesses could actually open for people to come into the business, we've got extra space for them to span outside at a spread out area. But I do think we're hopefully be able to prove that, allowing someone, even if it's just for limited times of day or times of year or specific events, that we can take up a parking lane on Vine Street and Over-the-Rhine, which is the main drag for those of you who aren't familiar, and let people dine out there, and it's not the end of the world. We'll
Right.
do it in places.
I want to shift to residential for a second. We did get a question on here about how this might affect the residential market in a place like Over-the-Rhine. So I want to take that question and kind of pair it with one I was going to ask, which is the idea of the 15-minute neighborhood or the complete neighborhood. And if you live in a neighborhood like Over-the-Rhine, or the one that I live in, where you can walk out of your front door and essentially have access to everything you need during a crisis, do you think places like that are going to be more resilient coming out of this? And that the housing market, I guess I kind of am asking you to predict the future, but I know that you can't, but do you see that element of livability being higher valued coming out of this? Or of course, there's the other side of the argument, that is that density is going to be something that people fear. Kind of wanted to dive into that with you a bit.
Yeah, I think it's probably kind of what you sort of alluded to the end. It's probably works both ways. For some people, they think, this reaffirms why I live in, I don't want to just, actually I do, I don't care, disparage Westchester, Mason, or whatever.
The question lines are firing up.
Yeah. Suburb folks, that's what their choice is. And, but I do think for folks like ourselves that do choose to live in these kind of neighborhoods, it is reaffirming. But I wonder if it's just going to reaffirm what people already thought, which I know we all thought this way always. That's why we choose to live in these places. So I'm not sure it's going to make a dramatic shift one way or the other. More so, my guess would be that it sort of just makes people more entrenched in the way they thought about it before. Well,
and you guys, I think it's kind of hidden to most people. I mentioned in the opener that you're over $1 billion of reinvestment, but from a housing unit perspective, mainly I would say because Over-the-Rhine is limited due to historic guidelines, you guys aren't producing that many housing units every year. So this isn't necessarily where you need to continue to absorb 1,000 units a year.
Yeah, and we made a decision a long time ago that there's people who do apartment development that we would stay out of that business, mostly because I don't want to manage them on the back end. I don't want to build up that kind of big management capacity. And there's people that do that better than us. And so we've largely stayed out of the apartment building. But what we do is we do these partnerships where we take the first floor retail, put together the financing package, and then find a partner who wants to develop and manage apartments. So, right now I've got 600 apartment units under construction in various projects that all ultimately be owned by partners, but are things where we have the first retail or the parking infrastructure or both, and sort of put together the project. And, but we're still renting apartments in the last month. I don't understand. And then we've sold 4 condos. So that's the other thing we do, is do for sale. We usually try to do about 30 to 40 for sale condominium units a year. So like you said, a smaller number that we do ourselves. But we sold 3 this week. I don't understand. I didn't see them. So we're not showing them. I mean, we have 3D tours, but I'm not going to buy a house without going in it. But I guess if
you're quarantining and you're bored and you're surfing the internet, why not buy a condo?
Yeah. Well, back in 2008, 2009, interestingly, that was our best year of condo sales ever, when the sort of financial crisis happened. And it was really 2 things that happened. Is no one else was selling their house. So there was way less product out there in the market because people were sort of paralyzed. And then they had this first-time homebuyer tax credit that they introduced. And so all these first-time home buyers have this tax credit to incentivize them to buy, but there's no houses on the market. And we we average probably like, right around 35 units that we sell a year. I think that year in 2009, we did like almost 60. We'd like doubled our sales in a year that we normally have.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that we're going to have that same thing, but I'm not particularly concerned on the residential side long term. I think obviously there's some challenges in the next few months as people are dealing with unemployment and things, but I do think even if the economy doesn't recover as quickly as it can, the housing market that we're in, the very small sub-market, should be in a pretty good shape.
Great.
Well, we got about 3 to 5 minutes left. We had a couple other questions, Adam, that maybe you can tie together for us as we wrap up. You recently, I don't know what the right term is, but absorbed, took over downtown. Merged, and a big part of that program was the ambassador program, which you yourself had in Over-the-Rhine as well. Obviously, an ambassador program is heavily focused on safe and clean. I'm wondering, as we think about the new customer wants and needs around experience and this heightened responsibility or expectation around feeling comfortable, feeling safe, maybe as testing and screening and tracing comes online, if both through your partnerships and just through your operations, you guys will be in a position to really kind of lead the way in making the customer experience one that feels safe, feels clean, feels welcoming, allows you to still, innovate around your events and placemaking that you've done. Can you talk a little bit about what you guys are charting out around that to accelerate the kind of repopulation of the streets?
Yeah, I mean, we're dead focused on how do we quickly ramp back up our sort of safe and clean activities. They haven't stopped, but we did out of safety of the employees for a few weeks, sort of really scale back the work we're doing around that, and it makes sense because there's less happening. But it's absolutely critical, and you hit on it. Like, people don't feel safe, it doesn't feel clean, doesn't whatever. Like, we can do a lot of other things, but there's many people that are going to see that and not even give it a chance. So we're very focused on it. But I don't know that it's going to be anything different than what we've always done. It's just making sure we have it ready to go when people are coming back and businesses open back up, that we're ready, we're connecting with the businesses. They know how to access us, and we can sort of pull that all together. The event side, honestly, is where there's the most challenge. And our events folks are pulling their hair out, wanting to plan, but having no idea what is going to happen when. And so, we're making plans to open up the pool that we operate and, and manage the parks. But I mean, we literally have we already had a bathroom attendant that cleaned the bathrooms basically more or less regularly in the public spaces. But now it's like, we basically need to employ multiple full-time people to make sure they're clean and safe. Right. So we're as focused on as we can, but it is a challenge. There's so much uncertainty still that it makes it very hard.
Right. So is your general, because it seems like this has kind of been a theme, obviously, is your general approach to just smartly pay attention to what's coming out of the governor's office and what is being put out there from a research perspective? And
the city's, we've been in close, the city's one of our best partners always. And so we've been working with the mayor and the city manager and, following their recommendations and just sort of feeling out what they think we should be doing. And we also, our tenants are a good partner. So we've never told a tenant they have to do this or have to do that or whatever. We're just saying, how can we help you do what you want to do? And trying to take their lead and be in a support role on that front, on the tenant side. And then, we're eager to do whatever we think we can do, but we're not going to do anything until someone tells us it's safe to do it.
Okay. But as you prepare for things like Fountain Square programming and Washington Park programming, are you kind of making some assumptions now that whatever you do there this year will require distancing of some kind or a limited capacity?
Yeah, I mean, we are making plans to think through what it looks like to do things at the civic spaces, assuming people have to keep distance and all those things. Yes. And what does that look like? And what does staffing look like? How do we ensure that the distancing happens? What kind of events? It's probably different events, honestly, than what we typically do. I mean, we do a lot of, for example, concerts where you get a bunch of big people. That is that even feasible? I don't know. Maybe there is some, maybe not others. Those are all things that our events team are doing their best to try to plan for, knowing that we don't really know.
Right. That's really interesting. Well, we are out of time. I want to say I'm very disappointed that your son didn't pop his head in, and
they're waiting outside the door. I can hear them. You probably can't because they know that I'm on the video. So sorry.
Yeah. Well, for their sake, I think we'll wrap it up then. We really appreciate you coming on. This was great. It's fun.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think part of what we want out of this is for just opening up to others the kind of conversations that Joe and I usually have regardless. And we love talking to people like you about just how you're thinking about your work and adjusting to the changing times. So we really appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam. See ya.
Thanks, Adam.
You well.
See ya.